Good evening, everyone. My name is Tyler Lott, and today I'm here to talk about a research topic that I found very interesting for my research presentation, and that is none other than the effects of body size and sex of Drymarchon cooperi, also known as the Eastern Indigo Snake, on habitat use, movements, and home range size in the state of Georgia. Now, this was published in December of 2013 by Natalie Hosliff, Michael Myers, Robert Cooper, and a dear friend of mine, Dirk Stevenson. And I'm big into the conservation efforts of the Eastern Indigo Snake. So I chose to talk a little bit about this topic today and the study that they done and a peer-reviewed paper that was published on this topic. So getting started, the objectives of this actual study was to see what effect size and sex of Eastern indigo snakes have on habitat use, movements, and range, how habitat loss and fragmentation is affecting indigo snakes, to determine if management and conservation of indigo snakes is as important as it was in years past, and spatial and habitat requirements of a species as necessary for development of adaptive conservation and management plans. Basically, we're doing a study to see if it's the same as it was in years past, that we need to keep finding ways to manage and conserve this snake that we have in our ecosystem, or do we not need to put as much effort into it as we have in years past? So with that being said, looking at some past studies that was done featuring the Eastern Indigo Snake, a little bit of past studies that this certain study that we're talking about today was based off of. A few of those include one from 2009, which was a previous study done on habitat use of female indigo snakes. From that study, it was found that female indigo snakes use more open habitats than males do. So we're going to see if this still holds true. Another one in 2011 was a study done on home range of the Eastern Indigo Snake. That one was done down in Florida from a 10-month to 2-year span where they radio tracked males, and the male Eastern Indigo Snake seemed to use between 39 and 1,440 acres of land. So we'll see if that holds true. Another previous study in 2009 featured the distribution of the Eastern Indigo Snake in Georgia. Eastern Indigo snakes spend on average of 76% of their time underground, no matter the season or the sex. Underground shelters like the tortoise burrow may be a limiting factor in their range. In the last study from 2012, previous study on habitat fragmentation effects on annual survival of the federally protected Eastern Indigo Snake, it was found that putting in agricultural fields hurt the survival rate of the Eastern Indigo Snake, and we're going to see if that holds true. Looking at some methods that was done in this study, some of the methods they used was they captured 32 Eastern Indigo snakes, and they found them in sandhill habitats along with where gopher burrows are. And there they radio transmitted 20 individuals, 7 males and 13 females, released between December of 2002 and April of 2003. 12 snakes was then radio transmitted and released from 2003 in October to March of 04. Out of those 12 snakes, 6 male, 6 female. Another method was they located and checked every transmitted snake every 2 to 3 weeks. They then used minimum convex polygons, MCPs, to estimate the home ranges and kernel density, which is KD, analysis to estimate the utilization of distribution. Sample size bias associated with MCPs like bootstrap analysis used to examine sample size to home range area relationships, and then they calculated the kernel density at 95 isopleps of the home range and at 50% using the fixed kernel method with squares, cross validation, smoothing perimeter. We're going to look at some of those results in just a few minutes. For calculation of home ranges, they removed the consecutive repeated locations, meaning if they found them in that same location more than once, they took out that second time, third time, ever how many times they found them in that same location, because they're trying to track just how far in this location the snake travels, not what they repeatedly use. Some other methods was home range. From December of '02 to December of '04, they collected data in the winter, spring, summer, and fall. Their model parameters included sex, size, overwintering location, and number of radio locations. They calculated frequency of movement for 24 months and 14-day periods, where they ended up calculating the number of days radio tracked within the 14-day period. They measured habitat based on hydrology, what kind of vegetation was in the area, how that land was managed, and the presence of gopher tortoise burrows. Now, after they done their methods, their results that they ended up finding out in this study was they collected 4,993 locations for the 32 snakes during the 24 months. That is around 89 to 711 days that they ended up collecting data. They then measured the male snakes and the female snakes. The male snakes, on average, from the snout, which is their nose, to the vent located just above the tip of the tail, and males averaged 158 centimeters and weighed 2.2 kilograms. Females averaged 138 centimeters and 1.5 kilograms. The annual home range, which is the MCPs we talked about, averaged 930 acres, which is 457 to 1,410 in 2003, and 800 acres, which was from 454 to 1,225 in 2004. During this time, it was discovered that females use 81 to 874 acres and 345 to 3,775 acres for males. Now, remember, going back to the previous study that we talked about that was done back in Florida in 2011, it said that males use 39 to 1,440 acres. We see in this study that males are using way more than that now, as they're using 345 to 3,775. So that was a big change there. Annual home ranges averaged 934 acres in 2003. We just talked about that. And as you can see in this chart right here, as we look at that, we can see winter, spring, summer, and fall for each year. The dark colored shade is male, the light colored shade is female, and the MCP is in hectares, which is not in acres. You can do the math to get the acres on that, but as you can see here, males traveled much further than females did. Some patterns of movement that they discovered in their results was that all snakes tracked returned to sand hills used the previous fall and winter. So each fall and winter, they go back to where they started. All snakes tracked in the fall and winter from '03 to '04 and '04 to '05 returned to a minimum of 4 different underground shelters that they had used. This could mean gopher tortoise burrows. Several large-ranging males traveled 3 to 8 kilometers linear distance from winter to summer locations. That's a lot of distance traveled. As you can see here, it talks about, or it shows in this actual chart here, just how far that they traveled in meters and the frequency of them traveling. As we can see here, as the dark shade is females and this one light shade males, you can see just how far the males were traveling. But they did not frequently travel as much as the females did, as we can see here. So that's also very interesting that was found out. Some other results: use of habitats and home range selection ranked in descending order was wetlands, evergreen, mixed field, sparse fields, road and urban areas, and deciduous. Evergreen meaning leaves stays on the trees, they never shed them. Deciduous, those trees shed their leaves. Areas include sandhills, plantations, wetlands, uplands, clear cuts, and fields. And we can see in this chart that they really frequently used sandhill areas. Next was plantations, all the way down to they used fields and clear cuts the least amount. In habitat use, winter snakes were restricted their habitat use primarily to gopher tortoise burrows and the sand hills. About 67% of all locations in the winter were in sand hills, and 22% occurred in young upland pine plantation where gopher tortoise burrows are also found. Snakes exhibited less concentration in use of sandhill habitats in the spring, summer, and fall than during the winter. Obviously, in the winter, they go in gopher tortoise burrows to stay warm, as they are cold-blooded creatures. Their body temp can only be what the surrounding temperature around their body is. So because they're cold-blooded, they burrow deep in the winter to stay warm. We're also seeing a pattern here that indigo snakes really use and utilize and depend on the gopher tortoise burrow. Where there are gopher tortoises, usually 90% of the time there's going to be Eastern indigo snakes nearby. So some discussion from this study is that analysis and modeling were sufficient to describe home ranges and indicated that indigo snakes maintain definable annual home ranges. The male indigo snake home ranges reported may represent the largest reported for any North American snake species. Meaning that it travels more for its home range and utilizes more acres of land than any other species of snake in North America. Previous studies of Eastern indigo snakes in northern portions of its range, mainly Georgia, reported individual home range sizes. However, these results included data from translocated and captive reared individuals, making comparisons and our results problematic. This study only used wild captured indigo snakes, whereas previous studies used indigo snakes that were raised in captivity. Patterns of movement. Many snake species exhibit larger and more frequent movements during breeding season. However, snakes in this study exhibited the opposite pattern, meaning during breeding season, they didn't travel as much. However, they did travel a lot when it was not their breeding season. So that contradicts previous studies. Habitat loss, fragmentation, and degrading of areas and land remain primary threats to Eastern indigo snake populations, like clear-cutting woods, turning them into farmland, destroys the gopher tortoise burrows, therefore less indigo snakes in that area. The more that they lose habitat, the more that they end up getting closer to being endangered or extinct. I mean, this is fairly common sense. The more you take away something that it depends on, the less indigo snakes you're going to have. The conclusion of this study, here's basically when I looked over this study and when we really dove deep into it, this is the takeaways that we can confidently say from this study. Prime longleaf pine habitats being turned into farmland is still a factor that is affecting indigo snakes in a negative way. Once again, losing their homes, losing the land that they depend on, no more gopher tortoise burrows for them to burrow in the winter, pushes them out, the loss of their homeland, there's getting fewer and fewer of them. So that still holds true. We also see that this study adds to our understanding of the space use and potential habitat requirements. A lot of land is needed to sustain eastern indigo snakes. Indigo snakes may require more land than previously recommended. You remember we discovered that past studies showed us how many acres that indigo snakes needed, but this study shows they need even more. So we could have been wrong in the past and need to change our management practices. Less prescribed burns in longleaf pine sandhills is affecting the biodiversity. We need more prescribed burning. It allows new vegetation and it just really affects the biodiversity in a positive way. We're getting away from burning land. We need to get back to it. The inclusion of the eastern indigo snake into biodiversity management and conservation in the southeastern coastal plain would benefit a broad range of species. The gopher tortoise burrow is home to over 360 different species of wildlife. It is dependent on that. The eastern indigo snake is one of them, but it also has effects on other wildlife in the area, including the food chain and how it chain reacts to it. Habitat fragmentation, road and land development impacts of habitat loss on indigo snakes because of their use of multiple habitats. That means that the more roads, the more land that's being cleared, the less indigo snakes. And then simply put, the most important overall message of this presentation is more efforts to manage and conserve indigo snakes needs to be done. We need to keep managing. We need to keep conserving. I mean, this is probably one of the biggest things that we can do. We're close to having the eastern indigo snake becoming extremely endangered, if not extinct, and there's still time to change it, but we have to be more active in our management and conservation use. The purpose and reason that I chose this topic is because it is very important to understand the importance of the animal species that play into the ecosystem that we live in. Eastern indigo snakes. Indigo snakes are a keystone species in our ecosystem, and efforts should be made to make sure they don't go extinct. In the future, I believe that future studies need to be done to make sure that we are not losing the battle of managing and conserving these majestic creatures. If they go extinct, it will cause a chain reaction and other species may become extinct as a result. Eastern indigo snakes feed on a lot of different varieties of venomous snakes. Less indigo snakes, more venomous snakes. That could end up causing a chain reaction, and it could end up wiping out a whole different species of animal that venomous snakes eat. But because indigo snakes keep venomous snakes in check population-wise, there's a stable population of its prey, of the venomous snake's prey. So a lot can be done there. Overall, I really enjoyed diving deep into this presentation. I hope you learned and have some key takeaways from it to understand just how important the conservation and management is of eastern indigo snakes. And now you can get a little bit of background knowledge on just how much land is needed for the eastern indigo snake and just how they utilize that land and what other requirements they depend through management to really help them sustain their population. Other than that, I want to thank you for tuning in to this and listening a little bit about this presentation and this peer-reviewed article that I ended up finding. I thank you for your time, and once again, thanks for watching.